This administration wants every data point they can have on the American public. Our voter data, our driving data, our public assistance data. They're even building a surveillance state with the help of Palantir and Flock. But you ask for one of their emails, and suddenly it's like, oh, sorry, that's privileged, or that got deleted, or it's duplicative, or, that's going to be $100,000 a month. So, yeah. Let's talk about the one-way mirror of government transparency, because it's become clear that the Trump administration won't be satisfied until the one-way mirror is flipped so it's pointed at us. Look, I'm not saying the government should make every detail public. I don't need to see troop movements. I don't need to see your tax return, But the justification for keeping things from the public is supposed to be narrow, specific, and justified. If the government wants to argue that information shouldn't be available to the public, the argument has to be about this document for this reason and in front of a judge. That's literally what the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, established back in 1966. It flipped the default. So thanks to FOIA, disclosure is the rule and secrecy is the exception that government must justify. Same with the Presidential Records Act, which established that the daily records generated in the process of doing the people's work belong to the public, not the president. I mean, we live in a country where information has been so freely accessible that for years now, we've known that on August 9th, 1964, Lyndon B. Johnson ordered pants and asked that they leave extra room to accommodate his apparently rather substantial. Now, did we need to know this? Probably not, but I love that in a democracy, we are free to know it. My point is, any justification for withholding information from the American people must be narrow, specific, and well justified. So hold that in your head, because everything I'm about to tell you falls so short of that standard that it's almost impressive. In the first year of the Trump presidency, the government granted less than half of all FOIA requests. That's the lowest rate since 2010. And some agencies' backlogs are up 20, 30, even 40% this year. Now, some of this can be explained by the fact that the Trump administration is hemorrhaging staff members, making it more difficult to process administrative work like fulfilling FOIA requests. And of course, there's the fact that there has probably been a massive uptick in FOIA requests due to the fact that the Trump administration appears to be, awash in corruption. Still, it would be reasonable to assume that some of the delay is just meant to throw sand in the gears of anyone trying to investigate this administration. They are shockingly behind on FOIA fulfillment. While FOIA requires the government to respond in 20 days, the average time it takes the current administration to process a FOIA request is 240 days. That's a backlog of 12 times the mandated turnaround time for FOIA. And this exposes FOIA's weakness, right? The law only works if our government acts in good faith. If you remove the good faith, the statute just sits there on the books, doing nothing. We keep hitting the wall we always hit in the Trump administration, which is that law enforcement is the responsibility of the very branch of government that keeps flouting our laws. But it gets worse than just ignoring FOIA requests. In April 2026, the DOJ released a memo arguing that the Presidential Records Act itself is unconstitutional. Like the whole law should not exist. Mind you, that law exists because Nixon tried to argue that conversations he recorded in the Oval Office were his private property. Eventually, he was required to turn the tapes over, but it was a hard-fought battle. And had he been allowed to conceal those recordings from the public, we would never have gotten to the bottom of the deep corruption that was part of his administration. So, you can see why the Trump administration might be particularly keen on getting rid of such a law, right? And right after the memo went out arguing that the Presidential Records Act is unconstitutional, the White House issued new rules paving the way for the staff to delete their communications. Thankfully, we still have heroes willing to push back on the encroaching corruption of this administration. Watchdog groups are suing, and a federal judge is currently blocking the administration from deleting their records. But make no mistake, this is going to be a battle that goes all the way to the Supreme Court. And the basis for the Trump administration's argument, that Congress doesn't have the authority to demand that the executive branch preserve its records, completely misses the point that we, the people, absolutely have a right to those records. All of the work being done by the executive branch is done on our behalf and at our expense. Doesn't it stand to reason that we have a right to archive the work they're doing? Ultimately, we are the ones who hold elected leaders accountable. That same 2026 memo stretches executive privilege to cover conversations with outside advisors. This means people who don't even work for the government can give the president advice in a way that shields them from any public oversight. Now, mind you, these are people who take no oath to the Constitution and who, by definition, have interests outside those of the federal government. Besides that, including people outside the administration allows the administration to effectively keep everything secret, because the definition of who constitutes an outside advisor could be literally anyone. But wait, there's more. Since 2025, agencies have been pulling down public databases and web pages. These are data sets that are routinely used by academic researchers, journalists, and policymakers. Just a few examples of what they're withholding include public health data, educational data, and environmental data. Now, thankfully, efforts are underway to archive federal data before it disappears. One group leading that effort is called dataindex.us, and I'll leave a link to their website in the comments section so you can visit them if you'd like to assist. But deleting large public datasets seems a particularly cynical way of avoiding oversight, doesn't it? After all, you can't FOIA records that are already deleted. Deletion just allows the government to completely sidestep the whole hassle of having to explain themselves to a judge. But it's not just that Trump wants to destroy data we need. He now wants to put a premium on timely access to records. Trump's media company is charging up to $100,000 a month for early access to his Truth Social posts, presumably so they can take advantage of the stock market manipulation Trump is constantly engaging in. But no. As embarrassing and ridiculous as all of Trump's social media posts are, they are, incredibly enough, official presidential statements. That's public information. You can't charge us for those. Thankfully, The Intercept and the Freedom of the Press Foundation are suing the government for this on First Amendment grounds, and I'm optimistic that they will prevail. But even so, note that this scheme would intentionally delay information from being seen by the majority of Americans, not for security reasons, but so Trump can literally cash in on his role as a public servant. Unbelievable. So hold both of those standards up. While the government records are delayed, deleted, privileged, and paywalled, they're trying to pull your sensitive state data into the federal records. State data like Medicaid information, SNAP records, voter rolls, driving data. They want all of that to fall into federal hands. And they're handing massive federal contracts to surveillance companies like Palantir and Flock, so we can all get to live the full Orwellian nightmare. Their position is that they should be able to know anything about us without restrictions. But when it comes to our knowing what they're up to, we can't see it, we can't have it, the dog ate it, but maybe we could get early access for some of it if we pay the low price of $100,000 a month. A healthy democracy requires government transparency and citizen privacy. This is flipped. It's citizen transparency and government privacy. It's a one-way mirror, and you and I are on the wrong side of it. And to be fair, every administration fights disclosure somewhat. Obama, Bush, Clinton, all of them. There are times when executive privilege makes sense, and some FOIA requests may legitimately be impractical. But in previous administrations, the rules were the same. They had to make the case for withholding information narrowly, specifically, and in front of a judge. You don't just get to declare the whole framework invalid because complying is inconvenient or, incriminating. And this is being fought. Judges have paused record deletions. States are suing to protect their citizens' privacy. Archivists and activists are preserving history in real time. But make no mistake, it's important that we be vigilant about these efforts to keep tabs on us while keeping us in the dark about what they're getting up to while they amass all of this personal data of ours. Our elected officials seem to have forgotten that this government belongs to us, and it's high time that we reminded them of that fact. Stay informed, stay steady, and I'll see you in the next one.